tonight's late news, brought to you by Hyundai XL and MLC, where money matters. Ten's late news with Tracy Spicer.
Tonight, what went wrong at Canberra's fatal demolition? Could Radio Australia cutbacks have endangered the lives of Australians in Cambodia? And free phone calls, if you don't mind the odd interruption. Good evening. A bystander killed by debris from a building implosion in Canberra today was a 12-year-old girl. She was among thousands showered by debris when the old Canberra Hospital was blasted to the ground.
It had been billed as a huge party for Canberrans, but it ended in tragedy. Tens of thousands of people lined the shores of Lake Burley Griffin this afternoon, snatching every possible vantage point to watch the old Royal Canberra Hospital go up in smoke. After a half-hour delay, the first blast, ripping out the supports in the main tower block. Then 15 seconds later, the second implosion to bring down the old nurses' quarters. Witnesses could clearly see shrapnel from both explosions hitting the lake. Despite assurances all the debris would be contained on site, shattered fragments were sent flying. When the main tower block exploded, rubble was sent rocketing more than 500 metres across Lake Burley Griffin, peppering the crowd and cars with shrapnel. Some spectators on a 200-metre strip of foreshore were hit.
Literally next to us, this lady had been hit. Just, you know, people were screaming and crying.
Others were lucky not to have been directly struck.
I was taking some shots with the camera on the tripod, and the lady in front of me, I think, saw it coming, and she's moved out of the way and it's just nicked her leg, and I saw it sort of from about 10 feet out, coming across at water level and hit the tripod.
Some shrapnel was thrown over the heads of spectators, smashing car windows. Craig Allen, 10 News.
Implosions in Australia are nothing new. This blast that destroyed the former Prince Henry Hospital in Melbourne 3 years ago, one of the biggest ever seen in this country. The implosion of Royal Canberra Hospital should have been similar. Over the last 4 months, workmen have been preparing for today. The surrounding buildings had gone, leaving just a shell of the former hospital and the nearby Sylvia Curley house. The implosion in the hands of a group of experts, regarded among the best in the business. Royal Canberra Hospital has been in place for more than 50 years and made it clear to the implosion experts from day one it was not going to come down without a fight. The internal structure much stronger than anyone expected. In fact, the hospital was built with a structure more befitting a power station, with steel beams almost twice as thick as expected. But one of the key factors in all this was exactly how far the rubble would spread.
You'll have a system here where basically the bulk of the rubble will just fall. We expect only probably will be extended out to probably 10 metres, you know, at most, yeah.
It's clear then something went terribly wrong. Chief Minister Kate Carnell was given a full and detailed briefing late this afternoon by senior police. Mrs Carnell personally backed the proposal to have a public implosion of the hospital, and only last week, facing concern from unions about staff in the nearby hospice, virtually gave a guarantee that no one was in danger. The government has called for a full investigation to find out what went wrong.
Nobody even indicated that this was even a small chance. The view was that 50 metres from the site was safe. 200 metres was the exclusion zone, just to be sure. Something obviously has happened here and we need to get to the bottom of it.
At this stage, 3 separate inquiries are underway. The police are preparing a report for the coroner. Other reports are being prepared by WorkSafe and WorkCover. Andrew Messenger, 10 News.
Claims tonight ABC cutbacks placed Australians in Cambodia in greater danger during last week's coup. Our ambassador in Phnom Penh says many Australians were worried because they couldn't get vital emergency information from Radio Australia's shortwave service.
Despite spirited protests, Radio Australia's budget has been more than halved. The international broadcasting division was hardest hit, the cuts forcing the closure of a powerful Darwin transmitter. Reception in Asian areas, including Cambodia, is now extremely unreliable, with the Australian ambassador in Cambodia claiming many frightened Australians couldn't get vital information during the military clashes.
Radio Australia has always
been an important source of information to expatriate Australians who are working in Asia and the Pacific in normal times. In times of emergency, then it becomes a special lifeline for them.
But the Department of Foreign Affairs denies the ambassador's allegations, claiming all Australians in Cambodia received urgent information on the hour via the embassy's extensive handheld radio system. But it's claimed this handheld system can't be accessed in all areas.
So if people are away from the main capital, where they have access maybe to Australian embassy services, they can still rely on shortwave Radio Australia.
Kim Carter, 10 News.
A union prediction today that Australia is heading for a major national industrial dispute. It follows the refusal of the federal government and the ACTU to back down over a coal strike in New South Wales.
A month-long standoff at the Hunter Valley No. 1 coal mine has become a test of the federal government's new industrial laws.
So I think the ground has been well paved for this to potentially loom as a very big major national dispute. That's what Howard wants.
It's a claim the government denies.
Jenny George likes to see national disputes.
This dispute has been well engineered, with collusion from Mr Reith and the government, no doubt in my mind about that.
The government does admit it won't back down.
We are committed to giving employers and employees the choice of entering into individual agreements.
That's at the heart of the strike, the introduction of non-union contracts. But the government believes its new laws that allow that will also prevent the ACTU from escalating the dispute.
She can't spread this dispute. She can't spread it because the Workplace Relations Act is a major disincentive to the conduct of secondary boycott action by other unions.
The ACTU believes the government wants to cut minimum wages to reduce unemployment, but says a better idea would be an employment levy, similar to the training levy of a few years ago, to fund extra jobs. Paul Smith, 10 News.
A new phone company is about to offer free interstate and local calls. But there's a catch. Callers will hear commercials every few minutes.
Phone bills, quarterly reminders of how much we pay to talk. But this man wants them to be a thing of the past.
If everybody likes the idea of getting something for free.
In return for the free calls, you'll get 10-second advertisements interrupting your call every couple of minutes. It works like this. Person A dials a special free phone access code, then rings person B. During the call, person A would hear an advertisement for, say, his local golf club, while at the same time, person B might hear an ad for her local cinema or another neighbourhood business.
We'll be able to link up with the various carriers around the world and offer a free service worldwide. And similarly, we'll be talking with mobile carriers about providing the service on the mobile phones.
It's the advertisers who'll be paying for the calls, and in return, you have to give a full history about yourself. That way, a computer will know exactly what ads will appeal to you every time you make a call.
It's their choice whether they join the system or not. If they choose not to and they want to pay their bill of normal phone calls, that's fine.
Patrick Burns, 10 News.
Still to come in the late news, historic cities and towns go under in huge floods in Europe. And there's big bucks behind the froth and bubble of making backyard beer. A group opposing Pauline Hanson's One Nation party is threatening to sue her and the Prime Minister. The group, called Militant, came under fire after a One Nation meeting turned ugly in Melbourne.
Scenes outside a One Nation meeting at Dandenong in Melbourne's east sparked national outrage. Police say people were pelted with eggs and condoms filled with urine. One man was hospitalised after being knocked unconscious. Today, one group present hit back at its critics.
We've now got lawyers working as we speak to look at suing for defamation Mrs. Hanson, Mr. Howard, One Nation and also Mr. Pasquarelli.
One Nation officials are undeterred.
We find it difficult to understand why a group such as Militant feel that they've been defamed. But of course we must say, well, we'll wait on the writ.
Meanwhile, anti-Hanson protesters met this afternoon in an attempt to prevent a repeat of the violence. 2 more One Nation meetings are scheduled in Victoria this week. Militant says those protests will be well controlled and peaceful.
Anybody who's violent is not wanted on the demonstration on either side of the fence.
We welcome that. We welcome it heartily.
Tim Mitchell, 10 News.
Now the latest on the hotel fire in Thailand, which killed more than 90 people. The Foreign Affairs Department in Canberra tonight confirmed there were no Australians among the dead and injured. An Australian consular official has been to the disaster scene at Pattaya to check on the welfare of any Australians staying in the hotel. Tonight, the all clear came through. Well, the rain stopped, but the heartbreak has only just begun in Eastern Europe. Floods have killed 50 people, left tens of thousands homeless, and swamped historic cities and towns.
6 days of relentless rainfall has left thousands of square miles underwater. In Poland, the floods have brought misery to more than 50 towns and about 300 villages. River defences were rendered totally ineffective by the torrents of water which flooded historic cities like Wrocław, where residents are fearful of further destruction. Civilians, soldiers, firefighters, even nuns have rallied to the city's aid, filling sandbags to try to ward off the rising water levels. But for many parts of Poland and neighbouring Czechoslovakia, it's too late. Tens of thousands of people have already been forced to leave their homes. Others refuse to move for fear of looting. Roads were made impassable, bridges destroyed, and communications in both countries have been severely disrupted. The floods in East and Central Europe have been the worst in decades, claiming dozens of lives. And as the massive relief effort gets underway, there are serious concerns about health after oil and effluent spilled into the rivers. The rains may have stopped, but rebuilding is expected to cost hundreds of millions of pounds.
There was a big display of outrage in Spain today over the kidnapping and shooting of a city councillor. 500,000 people packed the streets in protest at the Basque separatist group ETA.
In their hundreds of thousands, they came to Bilbao to plead for the life of 29-year-old Miguel Ángel Blanco. But it was hopeless. Shortly after the 4 o'clock deadline passed, he was found, shot in the head. At the head of the march, the Spanish Prime Minister, José María Aznar, with his wife, carrying a banner proclaiming peace, now and forever. Miguel Ángel Blanco, a town councillor in the Popular Party, was kidnapped on Thursday night. ETA threatened to execute him unless 500 ETA prisoners were moved to Basque jails. His sister told the crowd, life is a right for everyone. But ETA, some of whose members are seen here in rare footage of the terrorists, were determined to show that they carry out their threats. They've killed 800 people since their campaign began in 1968. Once, people in the Basque country were too frightened to speak out against ETA. Today's demonstration shows a population too sickened by violence to remain silent.
There was mayhem in the Turkish parliament when one MP waved a banner calling an Islamist rival a pimp. Voting on a new coalition government halted and debate turned to debacle. One MP produced a pistol but didn't fire. Others escaped the fighting but were pursued by MPs wanting to continue the fight. A craze for boutique beer and beer making is sweeping the United States thanks to the force of women who don't mind a drop. Many have set up home brewing clubs to turn out some unusual flavours.
Talk about life and beer and you name it.
That and making beer is what's going on here in Mary Beth Rain's Southern California backyard. An avid home brewer, Rains plays host to an all-women's brew club.
We call ourselves the Grain Goddesses.
Lots of women have always loved beer, but the proliferation of microbreweries and at-home setups is making converts out of others.
I never really liked beer until I tasted good homebrew.
And Rains has been tapped to go professional, developing an ale called Hollywood Blonde for the Great American Beer Company. Inventing recipes and naming them is half the fun. This one was made from leftover wedding cake.
We called it Till Death Do Us Part Stout.
Homebrew kits that make just a few gallons at a time can be picked up for less than $100. And while Rains is a professional chemist, that's not a prerequisite. Basic kitchen skills count a lot.
It's a lot of cleaning. Raspberry ale, guys.
Still to come in the late news, Phar Lap moves to finer digs. And we will fight them on the beaches to build the best sandcastles in the world. A family tragedy is being investigated as the reason a woman and her 2 children drowned in Sydney's west today. Police say it appears to be a double murder-suicide.
A woman and her husband arrived home to find the bodies of her sister and nephews floating in the backyard pool. Minutes later, police arrived and desperately tried to retrieve the victims.
One of the officers saw the bodies in the pool and dived in and, with the help of the other two, assisted those bodies out of the pool.
The mother, aged in her mid-30s, and her two sons, aged 2 and 10, had drowned. Paramedics tried in vain to revive the eldest child. He was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. The woman had been struggling to cope with life after her husband left her and the children for another woman. The family was about to be sent back to Fiji after a failed application for permanent residency.
She's not worried about going back to Fiji. She's worried about the husband only, yeah?
Shattered friends and relatives who spoke to the woman on the phone last night say she was distressed about the marriage breakup. After 12 months in Australia, she'd been keen to make it a new home. Although the tragedy has all the hallmarks of a double murder-suicide, police say all three could have been murdered. Sean Fewings, 10 News.
Police in far north Queensland had to retreat and call for backup overnight in the face of a teenage rampage. A high school formal got out of hand and 11 teenagers were arrested when the party degenerated. Police retreated at first when more than 200 teenagers threw bottles and threatened worse violence. No one was hurt, but a police car was damaged and a street left carpeted with glass and debris. There were new calls today for a ban on duck shooting. The plea came from animal liberationists who returned to the wild ducks wounded during open season.
The ducks were a little shy about moving to their new home in Warrawong Sanctuary, but after some encouragement, the birds were happy to take a swim. These ducks have been nurtured back to health after suffering broken wings and punctured organs during open shooting season earlier this year.
Well, they're not going to get shot at Warrawong. There are actually predators here, but the ducks are in a reasonably safe environment.
The Duck Defence Coalition rescued 90 ducks wounded at Bull Lagoon. The group says it's time South Australia followed the lead set by New South Wales and Western Australia and banned recreational duck shooting.
If somebody hits a dog by the side, hits a dog on the road and they don't stop, that's a criminal offence. It should be the same with duck shooting, and all duck shooters leave wounded birds.
The organisation hopes to convince the government to outlaw the sport by presenting Parliament with a 15,000 signature petition later this year. No one from the shooters lobby was available for comment today. Adrian Rochella, 10 News.
In Melbourne today, the end of an era with the closure of the Museum of Victoria. 92-year-old Lorraine Angelo has been visiting the Melbourne institution for 8 decades. Today, she took a final tour with son Laurie, farewelling her favourite exhibit, Far Lap. The museum is now closed until the turn of the century, when it reopens in a new, larger building. Life's a beach for locals competing in one of America's biggest sandcastle contests.
If you want to build a sandcastle, sometimes you have to be a bully. You have to be prepared to throw your weight around. And above all, you have to be willing to satisfy a sandcastle's tremendous thirst.
Water! Water, water! Look at water! Water! BJ, stick it right here.
Even the youngest bathing beauties can appreciate a well-made sandcastle. After all, even before they speak, kids love to run sand through their hands. The annual sandcastle contest in Belmar, New Jersey is not designed for professionals. I think you're supposed to look at it while you build it. That, however, was about the extent of our knowledge, so we decided to consult a how-to video. Yes, there really is a Let's Build a Sandcastle video full of helpful hints, like using a foot. I'm gonna cover your foot up. To construct a sand bridge, and when you find loose sand...
To get it out of there, I'd like to use a straw. Just remember not to suck in.
The techniques employed at the Jersey Shore contest weren't quite so advanced. Show us your technique.
I went like this. I move like that around the sand.
Now, does it help that you put your arm out like this?
Well, not really. Just helps me keep my balance.
And while the how-to video demonstrates various tools a sandcastler can use, back at the Belmar beach...
Not with that shovel.
Now, is this the same spatula you used to flip your pancakes this morning? Or,
It really is.
Comes in handy when you're trying to whip up steps. We knew something was cooking when we noticed a fork and a knife, but couldn't quite figure out what was in between. What's for breakfast?
Pancakes.
This is one way to keep your pancakes thin. Maybe you prefer watermelon. These chefs were using shells for seeds. Do you like watermelon?
Yes.
You do?
Watermelon.
Which part do you like, the pink part or the green part?
The pink part.
Speaking of pink, there's nothing like bringing your own castle to the contest. Isn't this cheating?
Still to come in 10's Late News, the National Weather Report and a very husky Matthew White with sports tonight.
Thanks, Tracy. Tonight, rugby league, golf, cricket and motor racing. And also the Sydney Swans flying high after getting home in a thriller against Essendon.
Let's take a look now at the latest weather details. Firstly today, and it was cloudy in Cairns, fine in Townsville. There were showers in Brisbane, a top of 18 degrees, and Sydney 13. It was a fine day in Canberra, reaching a maximum of 12, and Melbourne 16. Cloud covers large areas of the east coast and much of the south of Western Australia as a cold front moves east. Two highs are over the southeast of the continent. The one over South Australia has a ridge stretching into the Tasman. To the forecast now, and the Bureau expects fine weather tomorrow in Cairns, a maximum of 26 degrees, and Townsville 27. Mostly fine and 21 degrees in Brisbane, rain clearing in Sydney and 16. Skies clearing in Canberra and 13. Fine in Melbourne and Hobart, 14 degrees. Finally tonight, Berlin has been throbbing to the sound of music. Almost 1 million people packed the streets of the German city to indulge their love of techno. The annual gathering is known as the Love Parade, and it attracts enthusiasts from around the world. The pulsating parade snakes its way through the city, dancers using any available surface to view the spectacle, and of course, to dance. That's all for now from 10's Late News. Thanks for joining us. Our next national bulletin is at 11:30 in the morning, and in a moment, Matthew White with Sports Tonight. I'm Tracy Spicer. Good night.